But you can see we actually have more keyframes than we need. And it's just extra keyframes Blender is holding in memory. So we can do the same thing, come up here to the X location, right click, clear single keyframes, and then also the Y location. And now everything looks the same, of course, because those keyframes weren't doing anything. So this is what we completed last time. You can see our ball bounce here. If you didn't save your Blender file or you don't have it, don't worry, I've included this very same blend file that you're looking at right now in the project files. Just open it up and you'll be able to follow along. So if for some reason you can't see the keyframes here, just make sure you click on the ball and then your keyframes will show up down on the timeline. And just like last time, you can come down here to see my mouse clicks and my keystrokes. Okay, so let's pause the animation. Let's select the ball. And I'm just going to come down here and we're going to select the last half of these keyframes, starting with this one here. But keep in mind when you're trying to select these, if you actually touch this top header where the frames are, you'll just move the playhead. So you can select it by coming down here, clicking and dragging, and then we can drag over all of these keyframes here. And then again, very important, make sure you hover your mouse over the timeline, press X, and then delete. Now let's move the last keyframe here to frame 40. And then this one to frame 20, just like we had it originally. This was the original animation we had set up last time. Well, almost. So let's go back to frame 1 and you can see that the value on the Z, which is the up and down axis of the ball, is at 7. And then this keyframe has a value of 0.9 and some change. And then this keyframe originally had 7, but we only have 5 now. Because in our challenge, we decreased that to make the ball bounce lower and lower. So this is a good opportunity to show you how to replace keyframes. And it's very easy. All you have to do is make sure that playhead, this blue line here over the timeline, is on the frame of the keyframe you want to change. And then we just change our value. Now we have 7 on the Z, and you can see it is now orange. And remember, orange means that we have not yet set a new keyframe. So if I move the timeline before I set the keyframe, it's going to snap back to what it was previously, which is 5. So let's change it again, back to 7. And then hover our mouse over the preview, press I on the keyboard, and then choose location. And now we've set our keyframe, and we've just basically replaced the one that was already there. Now we're looking at our original animation. All right, but let's clean it up a little bit more. I'm going to go to the keyframe on frame 20, and this is at 0.9 da 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 da. It's so close to 1, I'm just going to type in 1 here and see what that looks like. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad, actually. So we're going to keep it at 1. It's just really easy there. But again, we need to make a keyframe before we move that playhead on the timeline. However, instead of right-clicking here and choosing location from this whole list of options, I'm just going to hover my mouse over the X, Y, and Z location here in the transform, and I can hover it over any one of them, and if I press I, it will make a keyframe automatically on this location. And this is the same thing for any of these fields here. If I hover over rotation, press I, it makes a keyframe for all of those. Same thing with scale. Hover anywhere over here, press I, and we make a keyframe for those as well. But of course we don't need these, so I'm going to right click here anywhere in the scale and then choose clear keyframes. And then all 3 of these are gone. You can also right click and clear one of them at a time by clicking clear single keyframes. Same thing, come up here to the X, clear single keyframes, and then the Y, clear single keyframes. So now we have it going from 7 down to 1, back up to 7 again. But you can see we actually have more keyframes than we need. If we scrub through the timeline, you can see only the Z-axis, the up and down axis, is the one that's changing. The X and the Y stay 0 the entire time, which means they don't really need keyframes because there is no motion or animation. And it's just extra keyframes Blender is holding in memory. So we can do the same thing, come up here to the X location, right click, clear single keyframes, and then also the Y location. And now everything looks the same, of course, because those keyframes weren't doing anything. But this method is a little bit tedious, coming over here, making a keyframe for all 3 of these, only to delete 2 of them. That's not very efficient. So there is a better way to do this. And if you remember, this transform location down here is the same as this one up here, except for it has an extra little button here. And that button suspiciously looks like a keyframe, because it is. So if you click that button, you can see we've now deleted our keyframe. And then if I come back and I click it again, I've added it there again. And that's what these other buttons here are next to all of these other values. I can just click a single one of them and then add or delete keyframes to the single ones as I need. That's a lot easier and much more efficient. And now we don't need this properties panel open up here anymore, so I'm going to close it by pressing N, because this has all the information that we're going to need. And now we have cleaned up all of our keyframes and are finally ready for the graph editor. So when you are ready, head on over to the next video and we'll get started.